Welcome to episode 3 of the Israel Inspiration Podcast. In our first episode, we explored the Torah's case for Aliyah. In episode 2, we discussed 10 compelling reasons why so many Jews are choosing to make Israel their home. Now we come to the question almost everyone asks. I love Israel, but what about my family, my career, my children, my Hebrew? What if I fail? These are real questions. They deserve honest answers. And the purpose of this episode isn't to convince everyone to make Aliyah tomorrow. It is to demonstrate that many of the barriers people worry about can be thoughtfully addressed through planning, preparation, and education. Aliyah doesn't begin with buying a plane ticket. It begins with asking questions. Let's explore some of the most common concerns and practical strategies for overcoming them. The first category is family. My children are here, my parents are here, my grandchildren are here, and this is real. And there's really no easy answer. However, with today's technology and travel, making those relationships is far easier than it was before. Using technology like WhatsApp, like Skype, allows people to have an ongoing, close communication with their relatives who are on the other side of the ocean. And making Aliyah doesn't mean you have to be in Eretz Yisrael 12 months a year. I would say virtually every one of my friends and every one of the congregates in the shul that I attend in Yerushalayim has family on both sides of the ocean. And for simchas, like myself, be it weddings, bar mitzvahs, graduations, brisim, we make the effort to make sure that we attend those. And it does not really affect our relationship. In fact, many people have told me that even though maybe the quantity of time has changed, but the quality of the visits with their children and grandchildren have actually improved because they know they have to focus their attention on their family. So while this is a real issue, it is an issue that can be easily overcome with the right planning of when you go to America and when you stay in Eretz Yisrael. The second barrier is around employment. What about my career? Well, thousands of professionals relocate every year. Many people now work remotely, as kind of COVID created that opportunity to be accepted as a method of being employed. Others reinvent themselves, and yet others phase into retirement. So, employment, while it may be different, it may well not pay as much as it does here in the United States. Many of your expenses, like education, be it for college or school or elementary school or high school, will be much less in Eretz Yisrael. And healthcare will be much less in Eretz Yisrael. That will compensate significantly for the lowest salaries that you may be getting in doing a similar profession than you have in the United States. The third barrier is around language. I don't speak Hebrew, but many Olim arrive with very limited Hebrew. And there are programs, Ulpan, that are readily available to you in Eretz Yisrael. And in fact, I would recommend, if anyone is thinking about ever going to Eretz Yisrael, be it in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, they should think about taking an Ulpan. And in fact, most recently in my discussions with the Jewish Agency, they are thinking of actually sponsoring Ulpans in various communities throughout the United States to make this issue, this barrier of the language, reduced. And in fact, most Israelis do speak English at some level. They may not initially speak to you in English, but they do understand. And in fact, what I found is that when I go to a store and ask something in my somewhat broken Hebrew, they will very quickly switch to English as opposed to continue the conversation in Hebrew. And I also have wonderful tools. I use Google Translate when I go shopping, so I understand what I'm buying. These and other tools will help you take advantage of that technology and be more comfortable in speaking, reading, and understanding Hebrew. Barrier number 4. This is the fear of failure. Everyone is aware of a difficult Aliyah story. And most of those stories occur because the family did not do the appropriate planning. They did not look into the community. They did not look into the different educational alternatives that may exist for their children. What we often forget is that there are hundreds of thousands of successful Aliyah stories. So let me give you an analogy. Unfortunately, in the Jewish world, divorce is very prevalent. 30% of all Jews divorce. In the Orthodox community, it's somewhat less, somewhere between 8 and 10%. Anytime you make a change, there is a risk. So just because there is a high percentage of divorce does not mean that we should not get married, or we should not encourage our children to get married so we can have our grandchildren. And the same thing should be true about Aliyah. Just because you hear of a story which is very difficult to listen to and very unfortunate, that doesn't mean we should not consider Aliyah as part of our future. Because a vast majority of people who make Aliyah have successful stories. And yes, every life decision carries risk, but with the appropriate planning ahead of time, that risk can be minimized. Let's talk about children's education, because this is a major issue for people who are considering Aliyah with children between, let's say, 5 or 6 and 18. Now, moving a child out of their environment, out of their school, from their friends, can be very traumatic. And if I was talking to you 10 years ago, I would agree that if you have a child between 6 or 7 and 18, that I would delay your considering of Aliyah until they get a little older and finish high school. But today, things are very different in Eretz Yisrael. There are schools that cater directly to Americans, British, Anglos who've made Aliyah. And in fact, in some of these schools, some of the Israeli schools are coming and saying, we really like your method of education, and can we expand it to our day schools and our yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael? So again, planning is a key element, especially when you have younger children. You want to make sure that their education process is as powerful as the education process here in the United States. Yes, you need to be concerned that they may go off the derech, but you need to be concerned they may go off the derech here in the United States as well. Barrier number 6, comfort. And this may be maybe the biggest one. We have wonderful communities here in the United States. We have wonderful schools, wonderful shuls, wonderful friendships. And the question is not, is life good in America? The question is, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me? Lo alecha malacha ligmar, v'lo ata ben charim lehivatel mimena. It is not upon you to complete the task, but neither are you free to ignore it. Pirkei Avos. Perhaps not everyone in this room will make Aliyah next year or in 2 years or in 5 years or in 10 years. And some people will never make Aliyah because it may not be right for them and their family at the appropriate time. But every Jew should at least honestly engage in the question, how should Eretz Yisrael play a role in my future. And that alone can be a very meaningful journey, even if you don't make Aliyah. Let me share with you at a very high level some planning advice. And the planning is different for which segment of the Jewish population you're in, what age you are in. And one of the major themes of the Israel Inspiration Initiative recognizes that Aliyah begins with mindset. It's not logistics. Many people think there are only two options: move now or move never. And there's a very important third option, and that's start the planning, start the understanding, start the education of what does it really mean for you to connect to Eretz Yisrael. So if you have a one-year plan, I'd highly recommend visit different communities. Plan a pilot trip. There are different organizations that actually provide pilot trips. Olim Advisors has pilot trips. Other companies provide pilot trips, so you can go from community to community, spend some time in some of those communities. You'll see the education in those communities. You'll see the different types of people that live in the communities, so you would feel comfortable in eventually moving there. Study Hebrew. You have opportunities for Ulpan. There are online opportunities that you can use to improve your Hebrew. Meet with Nefesh B'Nefesh. They have a tremendous amount of information that would help you in the decision-making processes. If you're thinking of Aliyah 3 years from now, start reviewing your finances. Do you want to buy a home? That means you want to sell your home here. Do you want to rent? Explore employment opportunities. Build relationships with Americans who made Aliyah already, as well as Israelis who live there. You can get a very deep understanding of what does it mean to live in Eretz Yisrael through those relationships. If you have a 5-year plan, create a realistic transition from where you and your family and your children are to where you want to be. And even if you have a 10-year plan, if Aliyah is not possible today or in the near future, where do you want to be in 10 years? And what are the steps that you need to take so in 10 years you will be ready to make that decision? So let me just conclude with a simple observation. For almost 2,000 years, Jews prayed for Yerushalayim, for the ingathering of the exiles, for Jewish sovereignty, for the rebuilding of Zion. We are the first generation in more than 2 millennia that can actually participate in the fulfillment of those prayers in a strong economic country, in a strong military country, and a strong country that is surrounded with Torah and mitzvos, in a country where people are happy and have a purpose for life. The purpose of the book Coming Home is not to pressure anyone. It's to encourage thoughtful consideration of one question. If previous generations prayed for return, and our generation can return, what should our response be? For nearly 2,000 years, Jews prayed for return to Eretz Yisrael. We are the first generation in many centuries that have the opportunity to help fulfill those prayers. The purpose of this podcast series has never been to pressure anyone into making Aliyah. Rather, it is to encourage every Jew to ask one thoughtful question: what role should Eretz Yisrael play in my future? Whether your journey begins this year, 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now, every meaningful journey begins with a single step and with a willingness to explore the possibilities. Thank you for joining me for this 3-part series on the Israel Inspiration Podcast. If these episodes have inspired you in any way, I invite you to read Coming Home, 101 Reasons to Make Aliyah. Connect with Israel Inspiration Initiative and share these podcasts with family and friends who care deeply about the future of the Jewish people. Until next time, may Hashem guide each of us as we strengthen our connection to Torah, Am Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael.